Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, over the weekend I stumbled across an article which was talking about a recent speaker at a tech convention who, in her keynote presentation, had suggested that having Star Trek posters and other types of nerd culture present in a tech workplace was actually something that was non-inclusive of women. Now, when I first read this, I actually initially thought this might have been satire because I thought, no, there's no way that someone would say this, surely. Surely this is an attempt at satirizing that kind of whole, Marxist feminist thing of sort of seeing oppression under every rock. But it turns out it's not satire, it was actually real. I went and checked out the guest speaker, the keynote speaker concerned. I checked out her blog, and there's a link there as well to a YouTube video which contains her full presentation, and so I checked it out for myself, and sure enough, that's exactly what she's saying. The presentation was given at the Code for Lib Tech Conference, which was held in the US in February of this year. I think it was February the 14th, in fact, that she delivered this keynote address. And the speaker's name was Chris Berg. Now, what's interesting about this is the spelling of her name actually looks like it could be pronounced Borg. I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, so correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the Borg in Star Trek was that they were the alien horde, if you like, that wants to assimilate everyone into their hive mind. So it's all about groupthink, and you're not allowed to think for yourself and be an individual, which I thought was kind of ironic when you consider what's being proposed here. But anyway, let's have a look. Here's the actual video clip of her talking about Star Trek posters and other aspects of nerd culture. Here's the salient point that she's making here in her presentation.
Man, I've said this part before, and I always get people don't like it. So there's research that shows that workplaces that are plastered with stereotypical tech or nerd guy images, so like Star Trek posters and toys and stuff, that has a negative impact on women's likelihood of pursuing tech work and of staying in tech work in general. And definitely of staying in that particular work environment. And man, people love their Star Trek posters. And even the women, right? So a lot of the women will say, but I like Star Trek. And in sociology, we called that selecting on the dependent variable. The women who stay and are comfortable in a situation are comfortable with the kind of culture that's in that, are often comfortable in the culture that's in that situation. It's the people who aren't there that may have left because of this culture that doesn't seem welcoming. So all you got to do is replace the Star Trek posters with travel posters, right? Don't name your projects or your printers or your domains after only male figures in Greek mythology. Just generally avoid the inside nerd jokes, because that kind of thing reinforces the stereotypes about who does tech. And that stereotype is, in fact, a male nerd stereotype.
So here's my thoughts about what she's saying. First of all, I think this idea is both derogatory and dangerous. I think it's derogatory to women because effectively what is being suggested here is that women are so sensitive to the world around them, that they are so fragile, that they are incapable of matching wits, of surviving in a workplace where people around them have a different type of entertainment culture and they enjoy different types of entertainment to the type of entertainment that they enjoy or find themselves watching on a regular basis. This is absolutely insane. As I said, this is just, to me, what kind of sort of idea about women do you have in mind to think that they're such delicate snowflakes that they could not survive in an environment just because people have a different type of poster on the wall to the one that they would prefer. Now, we're not talking here about anything truly obscene and derogatory. We're not talking about posters on the wall that say, women suck, women go home, we don't want you in tech, or highly obscene pornographic images that are degrading to women. We are talking about harmless entertainment preferences here. This is just so absurd. What makes this even more absurd is that my wife is the Star Trek nerd in our house. She knows much more about Star Trek than I could ever hope to know. She loves Star Trek more than I've ever loved it. And there's this whole irony here. For me, being surrounded by Star Trek posters would not be my first preference. But here's the thing. It also wouldn't destroy my ability to have a good, healthy working relationship with people if I was surrounded by people who like Star Trek. It wouldn't destroy my ability to have a good, healthy, functioning human relationship with these people that went beyond work either. That's the thing about the human experience and what being an adult is all about. And so to promote this idea that somehow you are the victim of oppression or some form of open hostility just because people have different entertainment preferences to you, I think A, that is derogatory to women, and B, it is belittling of genuine cases of injustice and prejudice that people will encounter in a workplace or could encounter in a workplace. To suggest that this is anywhere on a par with a workplace that is practicing or engaging in practices that are deliberately exclusionary and prejudicial and harmful to women, I'm sorry, this is just, frankly, it's insane. It really is insane. The reason I think this is dangerous is because effectively what it's doing is it's saying to any woman who hear this message and embrace this message and say, yes, I think this is true, what they're being taught is that they should consider themselves to be the center of the known universe, effectively, that they are so important that any workplace that they enter into should kowtow and bend itself and adapt itself to them based on the most simplistic reasoning, mere entertainment preferences. This is not how workplaces actually work, and you should not go into the workforce thinking that the workforce or your workplace should effectively be subjugating it to yourself at such a simplistic kind of level. Your workplace obviously should be a place that is non-hostile, where no harm is being done, where there isn't active or open prejudice, etc., etc., etc. But to suggest that it should be something that conforms to your every single want and desire, especially in something as so basic and I would call it meaningless as your entertainment preferences, is really, it's a very dangerous idea to go into a workforce with. I would also suggest that it's probably contrary, if you think about it, to the very principle of diversity which she's trying to espouse here, because surely the whole point of diversity is that you have diversity. The moment, though, that you have someone come into a workforce and then you completely remove anything that they don't find enjoyable when it comes to entertainment, or they don't like the fact that you name your servers after male Greek mythological figures, etc., basic nerd culture type stuff. So the moment you destroy all of that and get rid of it, and as she suggests, chuck up travel posters and go for this more generic bland thing, there is no more diversity at that point. Effectively, what you've got is one group imposing their views on another group. That's not how diversity is supposed to work. Surely diversity would be that someone is welcomed into a workplace despite what their personal poster preference might be, or their personal preference for the type of culture that it might exist around naming servers and printers, right? And then they get to stamp their own little mark on that workplace with their own cultural preferences when the opportunity presents itself. And that's how diversity works. You have variety. Variety is the spice of life. But the moment you destroy one aspect of it and say, no nerd culture, you naughty, naughty nerds, you must not have your nerd culture here, and we're doing this in the name of diversity, is the moment you don't have diversity anymore. Now it's everyone must think, again, ironically, like the Borg. You must become part of the hive mind. Effectively, I think what you've got here is a form of mollycoddling totalitarianism, where on the one sense it wants to treat women like they're infants, effectively. They're very infantile in their approach to the workplace, and they need to be sheltered and protected from the most inane things. But at the same time, it does it in a way that's very totalitarian, and it wants to impose its will on other people simply for, again, the most inane personal preferences. These things must be destroyed. Effectively, I'd argue this: if you accept the views that Berg is espousing here in her presentation on this particular point, then I would argue that you are really not ready for the workforce. The workforce is not a place that you enter into and then you demand that the workforce meets your every need and it kowtows to what your personal desires are. That is not how the workforce is supposed to work. In fact, if you go in with this sort of attitude, I would argue that you're going to find yourself in real trouble the moment you have to have your first very honest performance appraisal, and perhaps where there's aspects of your performance which are not up to scratch. You're really going to struggle with that, and you're going to think, well, what's going on? Is everyone against me? How dare they say that that my performance needs to be critically evaluated and I need to make improvements? You are going to struggle if you're ever sent out to engage with a client, for example, who holds a different approach to these kind of issues and has Star Trek posters and nerd culture all over the workplace, and you have to engage with them and figure out how to fix a problem related to into a job. How are you going to handle that? If you think that everyone else around you effectively should be conforming and shaping their very entertainment preferences effectively, or the way they express those things based on what you do or do not want. That's not how the workforce works, and that's not how being an adult actually works either. Because what should happen with adults who enter into the workforce is they should expect to encounter diversity. They should expect to encounter cultures and workplaces that might not be everything that they're used to in their little bubble. That's the whole beauty of the human experience. We get beyond our own bubble. We make friends with people, or we engage with people in other settings beyond our usual settings. And the workplace is probably the most common place this happens now, where we meet different folks with different strokes. We encounter a diversity of ideas and opinions and views about the world, and we become more well-rounded and more reasoned instead of living in a little silo of our own making, a little bubble where we don't entertain anything but our own preferences. That is not the path to adulthood. And so what happens is an adult goes into a workplace where they've got lots of nerd culture, and they go, okay, I'm not a big fan of the nerd culture, but you know what? These are human beings. I'm not going to get bogged down in the inane identity politics. I'm going to treat them as my equals. I'm going to treat them with respect. I'm going to have a good work ethic. I'm going to do the best job I can, and hopefully something good comes out of it. And guess what? Hopefully, if it does, you build a working relationship and a human relationship with these people that has some meaning and has some importance in your life, and some good things are achieved for you personally and I guess economically and career-wise and everything else as well. And hey presto, that's how an adult does this. Or if you find, well, I'm an adult, but this culture really doesn't suit me, I'm not a big fan of the nerd culture, but I do still want to be in the tech industry, then guess what? I either leave and I start my own new tech company where we have a different type of culture, or I go and find another workplace in the tech industry where they have a different approach to these kind of things, and I choose to work there because that's what adults do. And this is what adult freedom and engagement with other adult human beings is all about, especially in a workplace. It is not about trying to force people to conform to your, especially at this level of minutiae. I mean, you're talking here about people's personal entertainment preferences ultimately, and the things they find enjoyable. They're non-threatening, non-hostile forms of self-expression that have no significant bearing upon other people at the end of the day. Like I said, this is not prejudice. This is not genuine harm at all. And so it is absurd to be trying to equate it to that level of interaction between people. Like I said, if you're pretty passionate about trying to encourage women into the tech space, look, go for it. More power to you. But this is not the way that you do it. Because effectively what you're going to end up doing is you are going to end up turning women who adopt this kind of mentality and people who hear this kind of message, you're going to start making them think that women are actually like the pampered enemy. Women are some sort of enemy who are going to come into your tech space, and they are going to destroy your personal cultural preferences just because another group of people demands it be so. Make it so. Again, ironic, I know. And that basically they are entitled to special treatments that you're not entitled to. So, for example, they are allowed to have their travel posters on the wall, but you're not allowed to have your Star Trek posters on the wall. So they get a special entitlement that you don't get. And this is all being done in the name of diversity. This isn't helpful for women. This isn't helpful for young women who are considering a career or how they should be interacting with the workforce and how their workforce should interact with them. And this is definitely not helpful for those who actually exist in this industry already. Effectively, what you're going to do is create a culture whereby people just become hostile to the very idea of diversity instead of accepting it and getting on with the job of just living in a diverse human race, which is what we've been doing, I think, for quite some time now, without all the diversity politics and stuff that are now being sort of really jammed down people's throats. At the end of the day, ultimately, I think there's a big contradiction to in what she's really saying here, because she actually talks about in her own presentation, apparently about how dangerous and bad these stereotypes are, but then she talks about the fact that there are women who work in these industries, and that there are women who, despite these stereotypes that, you know, you're a nerdy white male, there are successful women who are doing, in her own words, who are very successful in tech, despite the stereotype. So what does that tell you? A stereotype is just a stereotype at the end of the day. It has no real bearing on you. because it's a stereotype. It doesn't exist as an oppressive physical force that comes into your workplace and somehow does you harm. It's just a stereotype. It's an idea. It's a concept. And you know how you destroy stereotypes? The best and most effective way is you get into a place where there is a stereotype and you change it by showing, hey, not everyone conforms to that same stereotype. And the more people who don't conform to the stereotype, guess what? The new idea catches on. Ironically, it probably becomes a stereotype in and of itself. But anyway, that's my thoughts. I'd love to hear your views as per usual, so please let me know in the comments section below what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if you like the content I'm making and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon. A huge thank you to everyone who is already supporting me via Patreon. It's great to have that support, especially when YouTube seems to be so arbitrary and often, I'd argue, unjust in the way that they demonetize certain videos. So it's great to have you in my corner. If you want to become a supporter of mine on Patreon, there is a link in the description below, and there is a link that will appear on screen at the end of this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Left Foot Media.